Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Play Trails in the Sky, the Third Blind. Let us continue reading this story that we already read in like second chapter, but whatever. I think I read this chapter, right? Yes, I did. Okay. Number 6. Chapter 6. Ascertaining the Inner Workings. My orbment, emptied bag and package wrapped in old magazine paper were laid out neatly on the table in front of me. The bracer sitting opposite me gazed alternately at my face and the items on the table, as if trying to gauge my reaction to them. Constantly rubbing his chin between his fingers, it appeared to me as though he were making an effort to display his right hand, snugly fit within a leather gauntlet. I'd been led to the second floor of the lodge by the two men, and then, after they had painstakingly checked the layout of the floor, I was taken to the farthest room from the stairs. It occurred to me that the reason for the use of the makeshift space was due to there being no guild branch nearby. The first man to sit in front of me was the lanky one. He told me his name, but I soon forgot which one was Clayton and which one was Pavel. So these two names are familiar, right? Aren't they elsewhere in this game? I don't remember where, though, who they are. I feel like they're NPCs we've come across. That would be weird because they're braces, so maybe not. Maybe I'm just remembering it from this book. About the time I had finished being frisked, the bracer wearing the gauntlets, Clayton or Pavel, whoever it was, returned and whispered something in his partner's ear. I do like how he doesn't remember which one is which, because it's funny because in stories and stuff, people get introduced to someone and they immediately know their name and they always recognize them and they know everything about them that they've ever been told or whatever. And it's like, it's nice. This feels a little bit more realistic. I mean, of course, there are people who remember stuff about people. I generally don't. If you introduce me to somebody, I'm usually thinking too much about how am I standing? And am I being friendly? And am I smiling or do I look psychotic? Blah, blah, blah. So usually I don't really take in people's names. I'm too busy going I have to introduce myself. I have to introduce myself. So it's funny that he doesn't remember which one is which. They're just both braces to him, I guess. It's just kind of nice. Anyway, I probably said this the last time. It seemed as though they were trying to locate Sister Carnelia, but having no luck. After much probing on the subject of her and the Jaeger Corps, and after relating everything I had heard from her on the train, I turned the conversation around and, playing the role of the victim, inquired into her past history. Though, strictly speaking, I guess I was, in fact, a victim. I just want to... Hold on a sec. At the end of the last chapter, what happened? They were, eating... And they're talking about the crime syndicate thing with, there are 3 people, blah, blah. That's right, and she had blood on her hands. And it became nighttime. Oh, yeah, and then she was telling him how they're a Jaeger Corps. That's right, because she didn't say where she was going, right? And then she went to the restroom. Oh, and then the braces came and picked her up. Okay. All right. Okay. I felt like there was a bit missing there. Now I remember. Okay. It was only yesterday that I recorded this. But anyway, her name is Selnet. Ein Selnet. Read aloud the lanky braces from a pocketbook he held just below eye level. Originally a constituent member of a Jaeger Corps, her present affiliation and activities are unknown. In short, added his partner pompously, she's not the type of person any upstanding citizen should be getting involved with. He reached out his gauntlet-clad hand and picked up the object bundled in scrap paper. Checking my reaction all the while, he unwrapped the paper, laying it out flat in the center of the table. Its contents turned out to be a lump of metal ingrained with a sort of clay-like substance. I blurted out, I was on my way to a research institute when everything happened. Oh, when everything happened. And then threw in the address of some non-existent client for good measure. The braces took notes, making sure not to leave out any of the details of our conversation. Then, to dispel any lingering suspicions, I agreed to stay with them under their watchful eyes for the night. The next day, I also found myself inclined to go along with them. I also found myself inclined to go along with them to the nearest guild branch in order to file a report about the events that happened back at the station, but I had no qualms over the matter. My greatest concern at the moment, after all, was not running into any more trouble. I awoke as the sun came up over the horizon and day broke. I awoke as the sun came up over the... this is a weird sentence, but sure. With the advent of a peaceful morning, I sat up in bed and breathed a sigh of relief. The braces who had stood guard the previous night were no longer present in the room, but the sound of their voices could be heard echoing out in the hallway beyond the closed door. Slipping my arms through the sleeves of my jacket, I felt a sharp pain in my right elbow, which brought back vivid memories of the woman from the day before. Suddenly, a feeling of uneasiness came over me, and still half undressed, I began adjusting my ailment. I bet you did. Probably made that joke last time. After opening its back cover, I used a thin piece of tan doeskin and started plucking out the quartz installed in each slot. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. It didn't take but 5 minutes to insert them each into different slots and rearrange their configuration with the set of light magic as my base. One by one, I replaced each screw until finally the metallic panel was back in place, and as a feeling of calmness set in, I rolled back over in bed. It's really nice to kind of read about that, really. It's quite nice. You get kind of like an image of how the orbment really works. It was at that time that a tall woman appearing to be a maid opened the door carrying a basin of hot water for the sink, with which guests could shave and wash their faces. After placing the small steaming tub on the table, the woman went quietly about her daily task of removing the bed linen. Finding myself shooed from my own bed, I reluctantly headed toward the basin when just beyond the open door, I caught sight of two shadows cutting across the hallway in succession. "They're here," I heard myself mutter as the low tone of my suppressed voice reached my ears. Okay. With only a bar of soap in hand, I remained unbelievably calm as I quickly shut and bolted the door. Then, pondering my next move, I stood still with my back pressed up against the wall. On the other side of the hardened clay wall, the brief clamour of fighting ensued. Fumbling with the chain attached to my hip pocket, I grabbed hold of the orbment I had adjusted just barely moments before. It was 2 braces versus the 2 others I had seen moments ago. Throwing myself into the mix with the 2 men from the guild would definitely put us at an advantage from a numbers standpoint. However, when I turned again to face the door, the voice of self-doubt came percolating through my closed lips in the form of a distant mutter. "There were only 2 of them?" I murmured to myself. If Sister Carnelia's words were to be believed, then one unit consisted of 3 people, not 2. Again, I questioned myself inwardly. Then where's the 3rd? The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized my plight. Something swung down over the top of my head, catching me around the neck, and the next instant I was flung to the ground. From the corner of my blurred and spotty vision came the inexplicable view of a woman with demonic, bloodshot eyes standing over me, trying to wrench the very life out of me with every twist of the sheet she had wrapped tightly around my throat. Clutching my orbment in hand, I activated it and fired off a burst of magic while lying half asphyxiated on the wooden planks of the room floor. The destructive vortex of compressed air sliced deeply into my hip, but at the same time caused the woman to double over before forcefully blowing her to another part of the room. Shreds of whirling linen flecked and sprayed with fresh blood blasted out through a gaping hole in the wall where a closed window once stood, leaving nothing behind but the shards of broken glass and a frame rent beyond all repair. The death of a friend. Wheezing, I breathed in, the sound high and whistling as the air fought to make its through my constricted windpipe. Still clutching tightly to my orbment, I unwound the sheets from my throat. Utterly exhausted, I tilted my head on its side and watched with reddened eyes as a small stream of saliva dribbled down over the edge of my mouth and pooled onto the floor. Ugh. When fresh air finally made its way into my lungs, it initially choked me nearly as badly as the sheet had. A thump from somewhere behind startled me from my fit. The Jaeger demoness, like a spring-loaded doll, leaped up from the floor of the room. The single shot of magic I had previously landed in her gut should have done the trick, but the fluid way she moved about made it appear as if she were unfazed by the blast. Within arm's reach of where I had subconsciously curled myself came the splintering sound of unseasoned wood being hewn down by a giant woodcutter's axe. In the following instant, Sister Carnelia came flying through a newly opened hole in the timber door, her entry punctuated by a cloud of splinters. Her arms as pliant as whips, she passed by the female Jaeger in a lightning-quick motion, and with a turning assault, clocked her opponent full tilt in the face. The woman spun with the force of the blow and fell with a tumultuous thud, her head cracking hard against the floor. Like a prima ballerina, Sister Carnelia raised her knee high until she had it tucked securely up against her sternum. She stared down at the outstretched figure on the floor. Muscles flexed, and without an ounce of mercy, Sister Carnelia let her judgment fall with the heel of her boot stomping down and crushing the wretched woman's throat. Jesus Christ. I remember this part. Holy shit. As I witnessed the grotesque and unsightly scene, Sister Carnelia gave a quick glance in my direction and beckoned me on. It's weird thinking at this person and the person in Kevin's thing is like the same person. Oh my goodness. Then, with a nimble assuming that these books are non-fiction, I guess. Maybe they're like the legends of those people or something. Then, with a nimble hop into the unknown before her, she cleared the broken window frame and lighted to the ground. I mean, the fact that it was all shimmering and stuff makes me feel like I should be reading it right now, so... She cleared the broken... yes. Quickly scraping my belongings together, I made after her in the same manner as she had left, out the window with a 2-story drop to the cobblestone side road below. Waiting close by and helping to break my less than elegant fall, Sister Carnelia led me on as we took flight along the avenue, brightly lit by the morning sun. A deafening blare from an orbital engine's whistle indicated that the first train was about to depart. Sister Carnelia immediately pulled a ticket from out of her coat pocket and held it out to me from the side. Reaching for the floating strip of paper between her fingers, I realized that I was still carrying the bar of soap from before, so I chucked it, not caring where it landed or who it might hit. Aboard the train, the smoggy haze from the incessant smoking of the nattering gentleman had permeated into every nook and cranny of the passenger car. There was also the smell of newly printed publications and the occasional sound of someone clearing their throat. It felt rather awkward to have boarded a train bound for the Imperial City with my bag still in hand. Oh, they're going to... I was going to say Estonia. They're going to Erebonia? Isn't that where the Imperial City is? Do you know what your problem is, Toby? Sister Carnelia remarked. You're just like that augment of yours. Using her white handkerchief, she stanched the flow of blood from my leg, which had been lacerated by the spinning arrow blades of the magic. That's really interesting. I was going to say this before, but I clicked past the page and I wanted to kind of reread that part, but because I wasn't quite sure if I understood it correctly. But it's interesting that it's interesting that he got hurt by his own magic because I guess he did it wrong. But that's really that's really interesting. I don't know if I picked that up if I picked that up the first time I read it, this book. That's really cool. I like that kind of insight into it. I was probably reading it without really taking it in much at the time. Because I think I was very like, ugh, this book is so dumb. It's so badly written and I don't like this kind of like cliche whatever. It's not that bad. I don't know. But yeah, anyway. I was a different person back then. Sort of. So yeah, it's actually it's kind of nice in some ways. Anyway. Once you get yourself into trouble, you keep digging yourself in deeper until someone comes along with a billy club and whacks some good sense into you. Plus, I've been watching a lot more stuff like outside of stuff that I would have been watching. Like I've been watching Hell on Wheels, which is like a Western, which I usually would not go anywhere near, but it's really good. And it's kind of like getting me into like a totally different genre that I usually would be like, ugh, I hate that genre. So it's nice I'm broadening my horizons a little bit. I'm a little bit more open-minded than I was before. Yeah, anyway. Once you get yourself in... keep doing... yes. Placing a folded magazine on my lap, she tapped on it with the nail tip of her index finger, indicating that I should read... Not that this is a Western, but, it's a different kind of genre that I wouldn't usually read. Indicating that I should read what was inside. It was a copy of the Imperial Chronicle, which had been published just that morning. A several-lined article, buried pages behind more titillating news, told of the suspicious death of one Orbital factory owner somewhere within the capital. This was the first time I'd ever become aware of Meek's real age. Oh, he died. I don't know if I forgot that or if I just didn't pick up on it before. Oh. Sister Carnelia continued her lecture as she mercilessly upbraided me for my reckless behaviour. You miss being caught up in all of this by a hair's breadth, she informed me coolly. At a loss for words over the shock of Meek's death, I put the magazine away in my trench coat pocket. Another 5 minutes in that shop and you would have gone to meet your maker too. I shook my head and with trembling lips let my thoughts fumble out of my mouth. I just don't get it. Why did Meek have to die? Images of Meek's cold body behind the counter alternated in my mind with that of the lump of metal wrapped in scrap paper. Just what the hell had I been carrying all this time, and why did anyone have to die over it? Oh, wait, he's like going... he's not yelling, because he's pondering, so he's like, just what the hell had I been carrying all this time, and why did anyone have to die over it? I pondered at length. Sister Carnelia met my eyes and held them. Because it's an artifact, she said simply. An artifact? I scoffed as I blew off her answer. Oh, an artifact? I scoffed as I blew off her answer. It's not like I haven't carried a bunch of them before. Artifacts, in short, were the remaining legacy of an ancient civilization and the generic term for any unidentifiable mechanism which resembled that of an augment. Is that like the yin and yang augments? No, wait, it's not an augment, it's like a... It's a quartz. Okay, never mind then. I'd spent my days as a courier smuggling any number of those items under the false pretense that the goods I was carrying were nothing more than rare antiques, and readily placed them in the hands of those aristocrats, amongst whom they were especially in vogue. And for the most part, my current possession appeared as though it belonged in the same group as the others. Personally, I could find no other value in the collecting of these artifacts besides the indulgence of oneself in a decadent hobby. Chiding me as if I were a clueless child, Sister Carnelia rebuked. You're wrong, Toby. This one's much different than the others. After a moment's pause, she added, It's alive. Unable to grasp what she had meant, I looked at her with a questioning expression on my face. Sister Carnelia tried again. What I'm trying to tell you is that it still works. Although I'm not really sure what kind of power it actually has. Aw, it would have been cool if it was sentient. It was unearthed during an excavation within the Empire's territory about 30 years ago. Sister Carnelia's subsequent story about the peculiar lump of metal told of the dark history surrounding a group of aristocrats who relentlessly sought after it. The artifact itself had transitioned from hand to hand by those in power, as one after another they were murdered while slumbering in their bedchambers. Wait a second, let me reread this. Sister Carnelia's subsequent story about the peculiar lump of metal told of the dark history surrounding a group of aristocrats who relentlessly sought after it. The artifact itself had transitioned from hand to hand by those in power, as one after another they were murdered while slumbering in their bedchambers. Okay. Then, at the end of the 100 Days' War, its whereabouts was said to have been lost. And strangely enough, it finally turned up in the capital after all this time, she said, finishing up the account. An announcement chimed in the passenger car, notifying those riding of the scheduled time... What? An announcement chimed in the passenger car, notifying those riding of the scheduled time of arrival. Sister Carnelia uncrossed and recrossed her long legs. The one who was after that artifact hired that Jaeger Corps to bring it to them, whatever the cost. So, as a result, I was dispatched by the church in order to protect both you and it from falling into their hands. Oh, it's an artifact! Oh, of course! Right, so it's like the wand thing. Okay. I sat staring down at the bag resting next to my feet as we approached our destination, and the moving train quietly began to lose speed. Alright, let's do the next one. What is the next? What were we up to? What did we just do? Was it this one? Okay, it was this one. Oh, yeah, it said the death of a friend. Aww. Okay. Chapter 8. In the bowels of the Imperial City. Moving purposefully through the crowd, we made our way between the rows of seats. Each time the swinging bag in hand struck the side of my knee, I became keenly aware of its presence. It was an unnerving feeling, quite like I had unintentionally brushed up against someone in an offensive way. Furthermore, it was nearly inconceivable to my mind that the ancient relic the Jaeger Corps were pursuing, with such a frenzy, was sitting right here inside the stitched cloth of this cheap handbag. What a fool Mich had been. Had he known the burden this project, this object would be one far more weighty than the both of us could have ever hoped to bear? I squeezed my eyes shut against the thoughts flying around my mind and addressed Sister Cornelia, who followed closely behind me. Will we be making a break for the cathedral once we get off? Yes, that was the plan, she answered, scanning the scene outside the window of the passenger car. I think that's the only option we've got if you want to make it through this day alive. The station where the train was set to arrive was unremittingly crowded with countless droves of passengers, and as usual, the sky was slightly overcast. Everyone outside on the platform stood shivering in silence with their collars drawn up to their ears, huddling close to one another for warmth, like a flock of waterfowl out on the tidelands in midwinter. Don't worry, I won't be tossing you down a flight of stairs this time, Toby, gestured Sister Cornelia. Although, if there were 2 more of you at my disposal, I might have decided otherwise, she added. Evidently, the numbers in our welcome party this time had seen a rather dramatic increase. The odds don't appear to be in our favor, she said in a low voice, the warm breath tickling the lobe of my ear. Oh, sorry, so it's more like... The odds don't appear to be in our favor. We won't be able to leave through the ticket gate. As soon as we stepped off the train, we steadily moved to... we won't be able to... blah, 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 blah. As soon as we stepped off the train, we stealthily moved to the opposite end of the platform, and after sneaking out a large door for only authorized station personnel, we jumped down onto the path of railroad ties and steel rails below. The biting cold wind of the capital swept freely across the unobstructed railroad tracks, causing me to shudder as it ruffled our coats with its chilly touch. Slipping between the couplers of a pair of freight cars, we moved cautiously along their edge, sticking close to the shadows. Over on the cargo platform, workers were busy unloading containers. For someone who had his mind set on becoming a dealer of pilfered goods, gaining illicit entry into the station house would be one of the first of all basics. Showing my ticket, I spoke politely to one of the workers. Then, with the scenario picked out in my head, I sold it to him as I played the part of a manager here on business with a celebrity of notable repute. Midway through our conversation, I introduced Sister Cornelia, who did her best to show the man a glamorous smile and feminine pose. I had possibly gone a bit overboard when I stated that she was an opera singer, because the way that she carried herself made her look more akin to a low-wage sales song in a bar of drunkards. Yet, in spite of it all, a worker graciously led us through. You're so good at that, it's almost scary, Toby, Sister Cornelia said as we raced through the station's warehouse sector. You should seriously consider... that racing through a thing? Okay, so it's more like... You're so good at that, it's almost scary, Toby, Sister Cornelia said as we raced through the station's warehouse sector. You should seriously consider doing another job. She went on. I bet you're going to tell me to join the Bracer Guild, right? Come on, those guys would turn me down in a heartbeat, I said as I laughed off the thought. Then, throwing the idea back in her court, I asked, So how about yourself? Why don't you join the Bracer Guild? Ah, shit! Oh, I didn't mean to click the button! Then, throwing the idea back in her court, I asked, So how about yourself? Why don't you join the Bracer Guild? Reaching the end of the warehouse sector, we came to a stop in front of a large chain-link fence. Sister Cornelia crouched down and, while sliding a drainage cover to the side, laughed at my previous question as if it were insane. "Are you kidding?" she asked. "They'd gun me down the second I set foot into one of their branches." The winding, narrow stone tunnels like the one we were in ran everywhere beneath the Capitol. We crawled along as the light shining down through the drainage grates on the side of the large road above us illuminated the way like a trail of flickering, orbal lampposts. The feet of those walking along the avenue passed right by where we were, but not a single person noticed us scraping our way along below them. For some reason this reminds me of, like, working at the Ministry for Magic or something, or like, this feels very Harry Potter-like somehow. Well, not Harry Potter-like, more like that other one. What is it called? Fantastic Beasts, more like that. Or just, you know, like when they're older. The feet of those walking along the avenue passed right. Oh, yeah, no, it's kind of like, what is it called? The Cursed Child? Yeah. The feet of those walking along the avenue passed right by where we were, but not a single person noticed us scraping our way along below them. And for some strange reason or another, the world just beyond the thin flagstone paved road appeared so dazzling in my eyes. Yet the Jaeger Corps, loss of the artifact in hand, and a senseless sudden death, all of which had never crossed my mind before, lay in wait for me. Dared I to venture into the open world? Up above. Okay, there's a car outside. As we pressed on, I began to think that the small round tunnel which we were crawling through would run on forever, when finally it merged with a high-ceilinged sewer surrounded by walls of countless blocks of chiseled stone. Can the car outside be quiet? Thanks. "We'll go through here and make our way over to where the cathedral is located," Sister Cornelia insisted. Raising one brow, she pointed her finger upward. "It's a lot safer down here than it is up there." "That's fine and all, but what are we going to do if it gets attacked?" Sister Cornelia grabbed my hand, and with that, stepped into the muddy darkness beyond. "Don't worry, Toby," she reassured me. "Faith isn't the only thing supporting the church." Alright, I think I might end this episode here. Wait, how many chapters did we read? 3? Yeah, alright. Let's end this episode here, and I'll see you next time on This Glacier in the Sky the Third Blind. There's going to be a lot of reading over these next few months of episodes. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.